item 6, the Hornby Library, Customer Services and Southwest Leisure Centre. This has come from the Community Board, and there is a summary of the deputations to the Extraordinary Board meeting published on the website, which we've had an opportunity to consider as well. Would someone like to move the recommendation from the Community Board? Jimmy Chen, seconded by Anne Galloway. Sorry. Has anyone got any questions for staff? Dion?
Yeah, just wanted to ask around the ground conditions of potentially Kyle Park. What considerations have we taken, and what do we know at this stage around that, and what's the confidence of the site being suitable for the proposed activity there?
So previously, when we were here, there was a request for us to get some geotech testing down there, which has been completed early, hence the reason we've come back to you earlier than we anticipated. The outcome of that is that standard foundations that would typically be used for building, piling under the building, gravel raft under the car park, which are common things used throughout New Zealand, are suitable for the site. There was no surprises with the fact that the site is contaminated, but there was no surprises as such within that contamination, which means that the usual regulatory environmental processes through usual consents processes would still apply. So yeah, we are confident that in the site for the facility.
And sorry, can I keep going? And so you're confident that the budget that we have allocated will be able to do the site remediation and build everything that we need to do?
So there's been previously scope talked about for the project. All of the sites that we've been considering recently have costs specific to them. Our intention is that those costs would be covered from the budget, but we will need to go back and talk to the Community Board and work through the scope of what would be provided for that budget.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. Just on that note, there's obviously some cost estimates to remediate the land, and that's going to come off the budget for the actual facility. So there must be some understanding, I guess, on the reduction of the footprint of the facility already?
Yes, there is, as we go through, and the response we provided last week to the Community Board was around the priority of what is in the scope to start with and working through, and what's the most important to the community, and do we need to start having that conversation. So rather than reducing the footprint, there may be elements within that may adjust, and we really need to have that conversation with the community about what that would be like.
So is that potentially uncoupling the project and just going before a aquatic facility instead of both combined?
No, it's not, in terms of recognising the previous resolution from Council, so it may be in and around the size of the community aspect of the facility, the foyer area. It could go into the pool in terms of the dry side space to change it. There's so many different things that it could be, and it could also link into how we heat the water. There's a range of different options that would need to be explored.
Just one thing, because this obviously was raised right back when we had this discussion at Council about the issues that the community was saying about Denton Park. And there was a couple of us that were a little bit concerned, and also spoke about actually just looking to reduce it in the footprint to actually still put it on Denton Park and actually make sure that the cricket ground and rugby ground weren't affected by it. And so this wasn't taken into consideration. If we're looking at potentially reduction of footprint, which is a potential, that could have actually been achieved on Denton Park and actually kept all the facilities that the community groups wanted.
I think we got a very clear steer from Denton Park when we went through the site allocation for that, but that would have been a process that's normal with every project. As you go through, we have a fixed budget, and we need to work through how we can build and what we can do for that budget that we work towards.
So is there a chance, I guess, when you move along, that the cost to remediate the land, if it becomes more well known, actually would be too cost prohibitive and basically remove too much of the budget from the community facility?
Yeah, so within the cost makeup, so Tonkin and Taylor have obviously done their reports. We've had structural engineers involved giving advice. We've had quantity surveyors obviously putting those figures together. So they've allowed a risk pot within that, contingencies within that, to ensure that anything that we don't know about at the moment would be covered within that figure that we've got at the moment. So we're confident that.
I see, very thoughtful. Because I guess the concern I've got is obviously there's a need for a aquatics facility in Hornby, and well, just creating the one location is potentially going right down this track, and then suddenly you find out it's not going to work, and you go back to square one again, and it's just going to take more and more time before the needed facility is actually open.
Yeah, that was the point of having to do the geotech work on Kyle Park before we came back with this. So in terms of we have done the geotech drilling with Tonkin Taylor. We've gone through, we're at a decision now, hence we're in a position to make the early recommendation, and we've got to today. So it's not like the land conditions are unknown. We've done the work, we know about it. There should be no surprises. Yeah.
Raf and Anne?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, following on from Mike's questions, I mean, I've read the Tonkin and Taylor reports, and I mean, an unconfined landfill is sitting there with some pretty hazardous material, including, you know, the VOCs that haven't been analysed to any great detail around the gas and the odours. And I mean, it says in the report that it's not atypical in terms of facilities being built on unconfined landfills. I'd like to have seen a little bit of information around examples of swimming pools, which, you know, are servicing a lot of young people, being built on an unconfined landfill here, which has already been shown to contain a lot of hazardous material. So I'm, you know, not entirely convinced by what I read there, and I'd be interested in your view on whether you think this is really a suitable site to be putting this facility.
I think we have got Paul from Tonkin and Taylor here, who's probably the expert to talk through that, so probably invite Paul to come and answer those technical questions.
So you say in your report that it's not atypical. In other words, other sites, similar sites, have been built on. Would you have any examples of sites that have been used for swimming pools?
Not specifically for a swimming pool coming to mind. Certainly, other facilities have been built around the city that have had landfill gas mitigation measures incorporated into their design, and that is a pretty standard approach in terms of gas monitoring. There are numerous buildings out at the airport. There are also buildings out in Wigram associated with landfill activities with the former Defence Force base out there. So in terms of designing a building to protect people from landfill gas, it's eminently achievable, even in a high risk or high sensitivity environment such as a public facility.
But I guess my question is, you know, given that there are other options, is it a good idea to be doing this?
Well, that's not the, I guess, I see no reason why you cannot manage those issues. So I'm not here to compare it against another site, for example. I'm just being asked whether you can manage the issues, and I believe you can, and it has been done around the country and internationally on a routine basis. I think it's also worth noting as well that the proposed or the considered location of that pool on Kyle Park is in an area where there would be minimal excavation of the contaminated material because the land would be built up with fill material, with other hard fill material, and so that actually allows for very little disturbance of the open excavation of the landfill material itself anyway.
So what about the piling issues?
Yeah, the piling. So the piling solution being considered at this stage would be driven H-piles, steel piles, which rely on friction as they are driven through the ground. Again, you're essentially using a big hammer to drive a spike into the ground, so exposure at the surface is relatively limited.
But they have to be driven quite deep and also epoxy coated to deal with reaction from the hazardous material.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that's quite standard?
That's standard. It's in terms of the not necessarily the epoxy coating, but in terms of steel piles or driven piles down to a depth, it's absolutely standard in the city in terms of keying into a strong gravel or sand unit.
Okay. I've got another question, not primarily for Paul, but in terms of, I mean, some of the feedback out of the hearings panel for the Denton Park site talked about the option, I guess, of splitting the library out from the pool, and I haven't seen any information on that, which I would have liked to have seen, especially around the budget and the cost, because certainly on the back of the envelope it looked like we could do that a lot cheaper. The issue also with the reserve status, that as far as I understand, that if you were just building the pool, you wouldn't have to change the status of the park. That's certainly what came up in Denton, because it's being used for a similar leisure activity. So why have we not looked at keeping the library where it is and repairing or replacing it on site there as part of this project?
So go back to in the attachment to the report on page 18 of the original consultation document, it defines why co-located versus not co-located, and in summary of that it talks about the capex savings of being about 2.5 million by doing them together, and an operational saving of $150,000 as you go through that, which is in that consultation report that was put out. I guess we're reacting to the previous council resolution that talked about having a co-located facility, in terms of there hasn't been a new resolution not to co-locate them together.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Anne, Pauline, Yanni.
I actually asked the question that I was going to ask about the operational costs saved by co-locating, so thanks.
Oh, right, okay. Pauline.
Well, mine was following on from Raf as well. So we talked about the effects of any toxic matter, coming up, and you assured us that's okay. But what about the disruptive effects of actual construction and causing the leachates to go down into the water table? So that's one question. The other one is that the landfill is 10 metres deep. So I want to know how deep are the piles. We know the water table is 11 metres deep. So how deep do the piles go down?
So the piles go down to around about 15 metres.
So they'll go through the water table.
So they'll intercept the water table. It's worth noting that there's, between the waste and the underlying gravel, there's no protective layer. So that waste mass is sitting on the gravel that underlies it. And so as it currently stands, if there is leachate being generated, it could get into the water table.
Currently, I know. That's
currently. So in terms of whether the actual action of installing piles could exacerbate that, discussed that partly with my geotechnical colleagues, and their view is that there would be limited, for example, drag down of material during the piling into the otherwise clean gravel. And any disruption or disturbance of the waste mass would likely result in, or could result in, a relatively transient or short-term effect, if any. The ongoing influence of the piles being in the ground, we don't believe there would be any real or substantial increase on leachate generation. And I guess the other thing to add on top of that is, because the majority of the waste is dry, a proportion of the leachate generation would occur through the infiltration of rainfall through the site. By developing the site, placing a building on it and placing an asphalt car park on it, you essentially reduce significantly that infiltration through that waste material. And so there's a counter-argument to suggest that actually building on it may reduce leachate generation anyway.
Well, that's a very good answer, thank you. So you're basically saying that during construction that will not exacerbate any leachates entering the water table any more than it is now, and the piles in there will not have any adverse effect, and in actual fact the building, once it's there, will actually have a positive effect.
Well,
on the
potentially,
water
yes.
entering.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yanni?
Thank you. I just wanted to check in terms of the scope, the component schedule of the facility, when has that been developed, or is that kind of like the next stage?
That would be the next stage. So if Kyle Park is approved as the preferred site, we need to go through a Reserves Act process, and while we're going through that, we'd work that component schedule up with the community board so that at the end of all that we can come back to council asking to confirm a site and the size of the building and basically what's in it.
And the component schedule.
Yeah.
Right, and that will come back to council via
Yes.
the community board.
Yes.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Anyone else with questions?
Just a quick
Glenn?
question. Thank you. There's a lot of expertise locally over dealing with leachate. So with the Trans Waste Board, with waste management that runs Cape Valley, it's all there. So had you considered approaching, you know, say Trans Waste, for instance?
Not at this stage. We're probably a couple of steps away from needing to specifically or do some kind of more than subjective or qualitative assessment of leachate. There's been, to my knowledge, there's not been any specific assessment of leachate at Car Park, as with a number of closed landfills around the city. So I think we're steps away from that anyway.
Well, the expertise is there. I'm sure they'd be happy to help.
Absolutely, and it's a question of whether the actual construction of the facility would in of itself require leachate management is a different question entirely as well.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So just clarification, because that's what I was on about, and you said it wouldn't. That's what
Sorry.
Leachate management.
Yep. Yeah. My view is that the works would not necessarily require us to manage leachate. So, not in a sense I don't think we need to get to the point of asking something like waste management.
Yes, Brad.
Just a question, if I can. I'm trying to work out how to deal with this because I want to support the project, but I've still got questions, which mean I can't support it, and I'm not quite sure how to deal with it.
Are there any aspects?
Okay, well,
I mean, I always like to try and see if we can.
Well, look, I'd like to have a peer review of this TNT report. Yeah, wait, please, everyone. And I really do want to explore the splitting of the library. I'm not convinced, but I haven't seen any detailed budget information which tells me that it's cheaper to co-locate. So maybe I'll just vote against it. But I do support the project.
Well, I could do this by way of amendment, and see whether there's a seconder for the amendment. So so the wording is leave it as it is. Yeah. All right, so it has been moved and seconded, so I'll open it up for debate. Jimmy?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Because on the 6th September, the council meeting, I just want to remind the Mayor and my fellow councillors. In that time, the council requests the staff implement the process of paragraph 5.7 to 5.13 of item 13. If you review those ones, regarding to this issue, the facility as quickly as possible to identify a site and the development of the Hornby new facility. So if we review today's meeting agenda, the total 211 pages, from page 25 to page 235. I would like to say it's an amazing job for the staff. More than 200 pages, all detailed reflect on this meeting agenda. They've done a great job. Also, at the Community Board extraordinary meeting on 5th December, last Wednesday, the Community Board made recommendations to the Council to approve the option 1, Coyote Park, as a preferred location to build out the new Hornby library, customer service, as well as the Southwest Leisure Center. And if we review those figures, 3 local, this community board, 3 local councillors fully support this one. And also regarding the local, the ward, Hornby ward, 3 local elected members also support. That's 100% to support this one. Just want to let you know. During the community board extraordinary meeting on last Wednesday, community board actually, we heard 10 the submissions, but plus 1, but maybe a little bit late regarding to the kind of business, the leaders, you know. They have a principal from the Hornby High School, but he was not only on behalf of the Hornby High School, but also the 3 primary school on surrounding area. He particularly mentioned they have more than 1,300 students. They have urgent need this new facility, not only for indoor swimming pool, but for the new library and customer service. And also the president of the local resident association and local community leaders, and even the sports, the club, the sports Canterbury, all these kind of submission, I believe, you know, all the committee board members and the councillor, we are very impressed with their submission. If you was in there, I believe you have the same heart, same spirit with me as well. And also the last week, the elected member, we asked the staff and also the Tonkin Taylor engineer, but today the same, all the other council to ask them. But I would like to remind our fellow councillors that when they reply, this kind of remedial those the dumping area or we mentioned the contaminated land. But this part of strengthen those foundation, part of this the new facility, and that replies for confidence is under control and fully manageable. I just want to remind you. And also, based on staff, my fellow council, the site selection scoring, they already, you know, to assess all kind of the factors, criteria. Then they have scoring. The Coyote Park is number 1, 69. If we choose some other one, even the second one, Main South Road, probably, you know, still we have never done, not yet done those deeper one. It's a 58. But compared to some other one, Warren Park is only 43. But even Water Beach Park is only 44. Why we need to do every, you know, just possible location, need to dig out, and do, then we probably need to spend probably more than $1 million again, whether it's worthwhile, it's cost effective or not. This is true. This the information here is more scientific, it's more objective information in front of us. Because I done the debate before, so I don't want to talk too much. To touch our spirit in Hornby, wider Hornby area. It's a low socio-economic community, the area. The vulnerable these kind of people in that area. Even today, I remember since 2012, when after earthquake, I request the staff need to consider the temporary the customer service should be set up in Hornby area. So after a year, they only 20 hours a week. Then I push again, 2013, then start with 30 hours. Which area in the city-wide is only 30 hours per week for people?
Jimmy, you're going to have to wind up. So
okay, I'll wind up. Yes. So
I know you wound up already, but...
I'm a little bit emotional. I don't know why. I'm very emotional. So that's very important. I just urge the mayor and my fellow councillors, you know, we should have I'm not saying sympathy, but I say empathy, you know, this one. Urge you animals support this new facility will be built up in the Kyle Park. We create tomorrow's history. Thank you.
Thank you. Pauline and
Well, that's a very hard act to follow. But look, I really want to support this as well, and you know my view on swimming pools, no doubt. But I have really big concerns about that horrible landfill, and the rubbish that's left there is really ugly, evil stuff, asbestos, metals and hydrocarbons. And I'm concerned about the leachates. We've got the landfill at 10 metres deep, that's pretty big. The water table sits at 11 metres, only 1 metre below that. And the piles will go down to 15 metres. But I've asked the question of Tonkin and Taylor representative here and have been assured that this will not be a risk to our public water supply or our aquifers. So RAF has suggested a peer review of that report. I think that's a good idea. However, I do not want to slow this down at all. So I think that today I would be prepared to accept the advice of the expert here, Tonkin and Taylor. The other thing I could just suggest here to try and get this speeded up is whether it could be staged so that the pool could be built first and the rest of it follow on when the Reserve Management Act issue has been addressed, but that's an operational thing, so we won't be resolving that today. It's just a suggestion. So I don't want to hold this up today, but in light of the information about the landfill, I'm going to abstain.
Anne, Tim, Dion, Mike, Yanni, this is going to take, I'm going to have to adjourn for morning tea, so I will, and Jamie, okay, right. David. Okay, and David. So, so we'll go to Anne.
Okay, my name's Anne Galloway and I'm the, I'm the councillor for Horswell. So I will be totally in support of the staff recommendation today, which is to approve Kyle Park as the preferred location for the new Hornby Library Customer Services and the South West Leisure Centre. Our vision for Christchurch is to be a city of opportunity for all. And by working together, we can create a city that uses their skill and talent where we can all participate and be valued. This decision for me is primarily, making this decision is about equity. The children, young people and families, in fact all residents of this area deserve a facility of this scope and quality that is accessible to them. By siting the pool, library and service centre in Kyle Park, we will be eliminating barriers that often prevent those who do not have the financial means needed to pay for a bus or even for petrol to travel to facilities like this. The Methodist Mission, people who work at the Methodist Mission, talk anecdotally about the fact that this is so often a barrier for people who do not have the means, the financial means, to enjoy and take part in what the city has to offer. And we've heard from a lot of our community leaders. This community started raising money for the pool 40 years ago. It's about time. They've been very patient. So I'm really excited and optimistic that today we will make a decision that will reward that patience and that will use this community's skill and talent, unify them around this project and allow them to participate and to feel valued by this city. Thank you.
And Dion.
Thank you. Just before when Councillor Chen was talking with such passion, we had a bit of a laugh at that, but I actually admire Councillor Chen. He has supported his community for many years. So Jimmy, I absolutely support you on this one. There is a huge amount of information here, and that doesn't mean that the information is good. Sometimes you can get pages and pages, and many times we get hundreds of pages. Doesn't mean it's good information. I do believe this is logical information, informative information, and it doesn't mean that if we go forward or when we go forward with this, there won't be other ways to mitigate the risks that we feel are there. And I think that's very important. But one of those signs that one of the gentlemen up the back had up there was that over decades that this facility has not been made, the decision has not been made or been put off. So I think we do have to take this seriously, and if you look at the information we've got, there is a huge gap. Many of those lovely 2K circles that we have on our reports overlap, but they don't overlap in Hornby. They just don't. There's nothing there. So I think that we've got to really move on this. Also with this site, I read there were 5 gentlemen in America that were interviewed, and they were all successful multi-millionaires and billionaires, and they started in the Depression. But the 5 gentlemen that they talked to, some who had very limited education, the one thing that they all talked about was reading, reading, reading. If you don't read, your chances of getting out of poverty are about 0. So I think that putting a library with this facility close to schools is absolutely essential. So I will be supporting Jimmy and his 2 colleagues in this, and thank you very much for the work. Cheers.
My name is Dion, and I'm commonly referred to as Yanni, but thanks. No, but in seriousness, I spent most of Sunday reading the information and actually reading the information that we had back when we first made the decision about the other park that was going to be there. So I've really listened to a lot of information that's come to me and read a lot of information. And as was just said, reading is important. The information is really good. My only question was answered very well. Thank you very much for the answer you gave there, which gives me assurance to actually go to the next stage, which is going to be the resource consent for the site. So at this stage, I'm very happy to support the motions that are up there, because it does need to go to resource consent and it does need to go to the reclassification of the park. So there are some issues still to go forward, obviously here, but I do want to make sure that this goes forward, and I think, as Jimmy succinctly put, this is the community out there needs a facility. I'm very keen to see a co-located facility with a pool and library complex. I think it makes sense, it's logical. We're always talking about co-locating facilities. There's a great one in Otahuhu in Auckland that we visited a wee while ago, which is a co-located library and community facilities and pool, which is very well used by that community, and I think there's some synergies with that community down here as well. So I'm going to support it. There's a lot of hurdles to still go through, but I very much want to see this get done and give the certainty to the community about one way or the other.
Put Yanni, Jamie, Mike, David and Vicky.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I'll just be very quick because there's a number of other people. Can I just say, look, I strongly support Kyle Park. You know, in some ways it's hard to separate this out from the conversation we've just had about water bottling and the impact on the environment. This is an example of where you don't look after an environment, you let a whole bunch of activity happen, and then you have to deal with the consequences. And actually, I think now is the time to deal with those consequences by getting a community project on this site. I would hope that we're going to central government for some funding assistance in terms of any remediation. I think we have had good experience with what we've done at QE2 and in other parts of the city of tidying up sites that have had these issues. So I've always thought that Kyle Park made a lot of sense. Nothing in this report has changed my mind. I finally just want to conclude with, you know, I think the importance of having a facility in Hornby is critical. I think if you look at the multi-deprivation index that is newer than the social deprivation index, you can see really clearly that the need in Hornby is far greater than other places like Warren Park. So, you know, in my local area, I would compare this to putting the Linwood Woolston pool into Ferrymead. It just would not serve the community that needs it the most, and I can see no reason why this shouldn't go to Kyle Park. Finally, I'll just say that the opportunity to look at costs and components will be when that schedule comes back to us, as that detail is worked through. So if councillors have concerned about how much is being spent on what, my understanding from this process is you will get that opportunity when that future report comes back to us. So don't vote against this today, but look and see what comes out of it, and then you'll be able to be much more informed about the cost of the different components, and then make your decision based on that information. Don't reject this today. I urge my colleagues to support it.
Jamie?
Joe, this is your job, this one, as promised. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties there, so they need to run it over there. Yeah, again, I'll try and keep this this brief, given the amount of people that want to speak on it. I might take a different slant to the debate around it, and it's really just around local decision making. And I see good governance really at a council level, with people sitting around here making the macro decisions and the community boards making the micro ones, and I think that that's a good fit, and I think that that's when local democracy works best. Where it started to break down was in Bishopdale, and I think I saw a bad process beginning to happen when I think the macro and the micro were going to be occurring from the people that didn't have that local knowledge, and we were going to end up with something that wasn't fit for purpose, going to be patched up in the wrong area. Locals and the local community board had a very different view. To its credit, the council recognised this, and instead of a recommendation from the people that understood the area and the facility going to a group of people that didn't understand the area and the facility, and then that group making a further recommendation to another group that didn't, I think everyone appreciated that was relatively absurd, and gave that the micro ironing out decision making to the community, and we ended up with a really good outcome, and I doubt there will be anyone that would say that the Bishopdale Community Service Centre and Library hasn't been a tremendous success, and that's because it's appreciated the value in local decision making. So that's really the point that I wanted to make, or the analogy I wanted to make around this. You've had a community board that knows the area, that knows their community, and we need to back that. Whether resolutions come through by 1 vote or 5 votes or 100% doesn't really matter. It's called democracy, and at the end of the day you either have a resolution or you don't. So I can't be a when it suits guy, and I don't think we can be a when it suits council. You either back community boards or you don't. And my view is the best possible example for ridding the city or local government of community boards would be if you don't actually back the community boards here. So you've asked them to do a job, they've done a job. Whether you like the process or not, we have a set of recommendations in front of us, and I think it's really clear that Hornby does need this facility. I think the co-location makes a lot of sense, and ultimately you're going to have a facility by the community for the community, and I will be supporting the community board recommendations.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. In the past I've been quite critical of a lot of the aquatic facilities planned to be built around Christchurch, and most of that was based on an out-of-date aquatic facilities plan. That's obviously been updated now, and it's very clear there is a need in Hornby, and I guess it's a shame we can't just change the name to the Hornby Library Customer Service and Leisure Centre and remove the southwest, so it's very clear it's a Hornby facility. I do have some concerns, and it is around the remediation and the cost to do that. I really hope that this community do not get shortchanged when they build this facility. It would be a shame. Like, I've been to the Otahuhu Aquatic Centre in Auckland, which does have the library as well, and it is a real asset for that community, and it provides so much value, and it's essential to get the size right. And if we start playing around with the footprint and reducing it because of remediation costs, then the community itself is going to end up missing out. And I think moving forward, when we do look at building new community aquatic centres, we need to make sure we make every possible advantage of it and look to co-join with community libraries as well, because it is what's best for the community. And I guess, like we saw with Denton Park, I'd also hope that once it goes through the resource consent process, that the co-location of these facilities don't become an issue, because just Hornby needs a swimming pool, and they need it actually quite urgently. So I'm going to support this, and I hope it actually gets through the whole process and the building can get underway.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. Just 3 very quick points. I won't take too much time. Ever since I've known Jimmy, he's been exceedingly passionate about the swimming pool and facilities in Hornby, and I heard him mention sort of the 2012, so he's been batting on for this for at least the last 6 years. So I'm very supportive of Jimmy and getting this project underway. And secondly, I look at the technical information, and having spent 3 years on the Trans Waste Board, I was often very familiar with reporting that came through with landfill management, and Tonkin and Taylor reports on various aspects of that industry. So despite the fact that I have some issues with Tonkin and Taylor and coastal stuff, I'm very supportive of the information that I've seen here today, and I believe that this project can proceed with certainty.
Okay.
Lastly, I think Jamie probably stolen my thunder a lot on that one. I do give a lot of credence to the community input, both community leaders, elected members, the community board and the community itself in this area, who have been very vocal in their support for a new facility here, and to me it's quite clear the community are by a majority are well behind this Kyle Park location. So I'll have pleasure in supporting this recommendation we have today.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just lovely to sit in the house and listen to the debate. Sometimes you all speak so well and so logically, especially you, Dave, when you're sitting between Anne and Gillian. But this is a process that's been going on a really long time, and the issue that came through so strongly over and over again is, could you please just get on with it, which I take that we're going to do today. But I just want to give you a little flavour of what came from Robin Sutton, who's the principal of Hornby High School, and I don't usually quote principals, but he explained about this being 5 minutes walk from 1,200 students, and he said this is life-changing and arguably life-saving an investment in its own right. I see this as allowing children in Hornby to find their true humanity, to see an expanded world, to lift some of their self-imposed limits that we all have. My final plea, he said at the end, is please don't heap deprivation on top of deprivation. Please don't deprive this community of this amazing resource. And from the whole community, please just get on with it.
Thank you. All right, I shall put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. And 3 abstentions, so Aaron Keown, Pauline Cotter and Raf Manji. That motion is carried. Thank you very much. And on that note, I'll adjourn for morning tea, and if we could be back here at 11:30.